and welcome back to another episode of the Real Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jacob O'Connor. Real Conversations podcast for those dedicated to doing hard things and living a meaningful life. Back on this week's episode of Real Conversations is my good friend, Quinn Robertson.
He's back at it again. Let's go.
It's funny because that was like the third time I did the intro because I kept messing it up. And today we're going to talk kind of about like functional health and holistic living, that type of stuff, because Quinn read a really good book on it. And but I messed it up like 3 times, and Quinn goes, "Well, there's your lack of sleep right there."
There you go. Everything sort of compounds on top of each other. It's a real thing. It's a real thing.
I learned how to play poker last night. So Quinn and then a couple of our buddies and mentors taught me how to play, and then we all played for a while. And it wasn't even that late. Like you guys left at like 9:30 or so. But
yeah, I was out the door. I think I got back down south around just after 10. So yeah, I mean, it was 9:30. I assume you guys were probably in bed less than an hour after that. So.
I was up for a little bit, to be honest. But yeah, in early mornings too. So yes, I am underslept, and that was a good call out, and that relates directly to the topic today.
Yeah, the world, like whenever something happens in your life, like the world tells you about it. You know, it's this feedback loop that you're getting into. So yeah,
100% what it is. Quinn, remind the good folks who you are, what you do, and then maybe talk about the book that you read, and we'll kind of dive into that discussion.
Yeah. So Quinn Robertson. Now run an angel investor group in Northwest Arkansas called the 412 Angels as a part of a international nonprofit called Endeavor. I was running an angel group in Wichita before that, and that's where I ended up meeting Jacob, and then I was at Coke before that, and just tech and finance and startups and all that stuff is kind of the career path that I've been on, which has been a lot of fun.
Super smart guy.
Some may say that. And so recently, and you know, the backdrop on this is maybe Q3, Q4 timeframe. You know, I've started to think about my health more than just as like an aesthetic, I would say. I think a lot of folks go, you know, they're in their 20s and they view going to the gym and eating healthy and all of that, and they think about that as more of an aesthetic focus. And now I'm in a position right now where, you know, just got married last year, and you know, my parents are in and around 60, and you know, you've got all of these things that I'm no longer in my 20s, and I'm starting to take this focus of, okay, I want to eat and sleep and work out and do all of these things because I want to live a long and happy and healthy life until my 80s or my 90s or all of that. Like I'm thinking more than just 6 months down the road right now. And this is the first time in my life I've ever really thought about it that way. And so I had a mentor of mine back in Northwest Arkansas recommend the book Outlive by Peter Attia, and just talking about medicine, talking about nutrition, talking about exercise, and thinking about your quality of life, expanding your lifespan, but also longevity in the term of expanding your health span. How do I live a long and happy life where I can do things today in my 30s that put me on the right trajectory into my 60s and my 70s, where if I have cardiovascular problems or metabolic orders in my 60s and 70s, rerouting that train is going to be really hard at that point. And so, I mean, for me, I read it as how do I get myself ready to go and building good habits in my 30s that are going to set me up for success for an extra decade or two of my life. So that was kind of the general thesis of the book, which was really, really good. And it covers the nutritional side, covers the kind of the medicine side, it covers the mental health side, which I thought was a good addition as well. So it's a very kind of overview of and very broad approach, which I thought was super cool.
Dude, I love this. I'm absolutely obsessed with this conversation. Like, this is right up my alley, the type of stuff that I really enjoy.
Yeah, and how far into it have you gotten so far?
So, I have not read the book. What I meant was I was reading about his kind of philosophies, some of the principles in the book. Because I knew we were doing this today, so I wanted to get like a quick synopsis on how he kind of worded things and what he thought about with it.
Yeah. This the general premise, and I'm starting to even see this in my own experiences with my healthcare providers or something like that, are you've got this concept of medicine 2.0, which is very much focused on get symptoms, fix symptoms. And 3.0 is the general premise is how do you think of it in a more preventive manner? And whether it's your metabolic health, whether it's your neurological health and all of these things, you know, some of this, the science is getting rewritten, I would say, in the last 20 or 30 years. And some of it is we're still figuring it out. And that's, I think, as I was reading the book, the hardest part for me as a highly analytical guy who wants to have like a playbook and a roadmap and all of that, and them coming in with prospective recommendations or things, and it turns out to be very much we kind of think this is the right way to go about it, and we think this leads to Y leads to Z, but we're still kind of unsure about it. And so that was the hardest part for me, honestly. And I think in my overall health journey, that's probably going to be the hardest part for me.
Darn empirical data.
Yeah, something like that.
See, I like this because I'm a very data-driven guy, very analytical guy when it comes to business. I mean, with health and wellness, if there's data to support the things I'm doing, that's great. But I would say this is one area of my life I've been extremely experimental, and it's just kind of hit or miss. I've always just been willing to try different things if I think there's a chance it could benefit my health.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've talked about this so many times to podcast. Whenever I stumbled upon ice baths, that's been my biggest game changer by far. Like from a physical and a mental standpoint, ice baths have been my biggest life hack. And people kind of go back and forth because I talk about inflammation and I talk about what it can do and it shocks you, and I talk about the dopamine release and some people have kind of said like, well, that data was refuted because X, Y, and Z, and technically they didn't have this and that study. And what it boils down to, like how I think about it is, I'm experimenting these things. This is what works for me. And even if the data doesn't support it, there's something called the placebo effect where I believe it's happening. And so I'm actually getting the benefit from it.
Yeah.
I read a book in high school, literally called The Placebo Effect. It was like a 600-page book, like super, super in-depth. But I loved it because like, it's such a real important thing. Like you literally can rewire your brain just based off of a belief if you believe it strong enough.
Yeah. And
whether or not that's what an ice bath is or if the data actually supports it, this whole conversation, I think, pertains to that type of thing.
Yeah.
Hey guys, Jacob here. Real quick before we get back to the episode, I just want to take a quick second to say, if you guys are enjoying this episode, please make sure to share the link with a friend. You may have noticed I don't run any ads in the podcast. In fact, I don't make any money off the podcast. It's quite the contrary. Over the past 5 years, I've invested a lot of time, money, and effort into the growth of the show, trying to continually upgrade the equipment, bring on better guests, and just improve the overall quality of the podcast. So if you guys are enjoying this episode or if you enjoyed previous episodes, please share the link with a friend. Saying it to one or two people makes a huge difference for me on the back end. As always, I appreciate your guys' support. Let's get back into the episode.
And that's a really good call out of everything is oriented around you. And when you think about health, your health is incredibly personal, and things that work for certain people, be it the macros you eat, the amount of sleep that you need, the whole range of stuff that's around that, it's incredibly personalized. And so if it works for you, you're not seeing negative side effects, you are seeing positive benefits. What's the issue on that front?
Yeah.
And because, all of this is filtered through your experience of how you're living your life. And that's what matters the most, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, I applaud that thought process there, for sure. I'm curious though, in, specifically like the ice baths as an example, do you get a sense of, it's not imposter syndrome, and I can't think of the right word, but when you have those moments where this works for me, but I'm not seeing, maybe there's literature out there that goes against this or thinks differently. Like how do you think through all of that, like personally in those instances?
I think it just boils down to like, do I feel like it's actually working for me? Like it is.
And then you kind of don't care about the rest of what all exists there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if it's the same for other people, but it is such a large, like it's such a significant feeling. Like I can't deny to myself that I'm not feeling that way after an ice bath.
Yep.
Like it is such a large change for myself and my physiology.
That's cool. I think we may have talked about this on one of the previous podcasts. The ice baths are a no-go for me.
That's still your contact picture. Whenever you call me, it's the first time Quinn took an ice bath.
Beautiful.
And it's a pretty funny picture.
It's a good picture. Did you ever there was an audio, there was a video of it. So there is an audio clip living out there somewhere.
We had to mute it whenever we showed it to people.
It's probably smart. Yeah. If there's a way to stick that as my ringtone, that would be interesting.
Dude, I would have loved that.
That would be, in a meeting, let's just be very clear. That's not something you want just like coming out of your pocket on a meeting. It was not a pleasant experience. But yeah, the ice baths are not for me, but I know for me, I'm like I prefer the warm side of the world. So it's like probably the sauna would be a good thing for me. It's the hot tub, it's that type of stuff. That's probably the relax recovery thing that's probably beneficial for me. And I don't do it regularly, but 3-4 times a year I do. And so that's, I certainly see mentally walking out of that, I feel better after that. So yeah.
There's a lot of data coming out on saunas and the benefits of that right now. I have not seen much refuted on that actually, but doing it, I don't want to start butchering numbers, but it's really good for your cardiovascular health, really good for your longevity. And again, it's good for your mood. I think you want to do it 3 to 4 times a week for 60 minutes cumulative.
Okay.
And sauna is huge right now. I've got a buddy that owns a sauna company, Pete Nelson, who's been on the podcast a couple of times, and his company's exploding right now.
Very
Everyone's
cool.
getting these personal saunas, and I just think it's a net positive that people are wanting to take care of themselves. I read today that my generation cares more about their well-being and their longevity more than any other previous generation. I don't know how they measure that, but that's what I read, and I think it's pretty cool.
I could see that. It's a I talk to people that are my age and younger, and it's simple stuff from the non-alcoholic beers, the those types of things. Also, great Biro or Biro. I can't figure out the right phraseology of it. Not a sponsor of the podcast or anything, but like cool. I've been drinking it for the last couple months.
Unless you want to
so.
be, we'll take a sponsorship.
Yeah. Just let us know.
Tom Holland, reach out.
But it's all of these things that I think. I mean, they didn't. Either they may have existed, but were just hyper niche. They've just significantly come more mainstream in the last 5-10 years. And I think it's largely driven by the Gen Z population or that crowd that's doing that. So I view it as a positive, and I kind of, do I wish I was in my early 20s again? I don't know, but I from being in that culture for that long and kind of growing up around that, I think that would be really cool, honestly.
Yeah, John and I are actually talking about these different niche categories that have come out kind of as a consequence of the way that my generation's thinking. Prebiotic sodas like Olipop and Poppy.
Yep.
Those are super popular right now. And John and I were talking about that because Poppy got acquired this week for almost $2 billion.
Yeah.
And the discussion John and I had is we're either drinking alcohol or we're having it's alcohol or water, I think, or maybe water with electrolytes. We don't drink soda.
Interesting.
We have no desire to drink soda. But then with the emergence of Poppy and Olipop, I'll drink an Olipop. I enjoy Olipop. The prebiotic part of it is less sugar, supposedly healthier, and then it's got the prebiotics in it. And contrasting that to the way we grew up, my parents used to have a soda every day.
Yeah.
My mom was Coca-Cola, my dad was Pepsi. I vividly remember that, and I have zero interest in that.
Yeah. I mean, I remember growing up when I was in junior high school, and I could drink and eat really whatever I wanted at that point. I would be, it's a 6-pack of Dr. Pepper, and that's what I would roll through on a week, or I would go grab 1 or 2 liters of soda and go through those in a week. I remember those days for sure. And I'll occasionally do a soda if I need some caffeine or something like that, on a long road trip. I don't crave soda anymore. I'm on the tea, decaf coffee, and non-alcoholic beer, and and water, and that's basically where my world is right now. And I'm drinking more water now, which isn't saying a lot. Isn't a lot saying relative to maybe middle of last year, and so it's not saying a lot that I could drink more than that. But I think I'm on a good pathway there, and just being standard hydrated has had benefits for my life.
I was going to say, Quinn, what maybe sparked that for you?
It was I may or may not have had a kidney stone, which I also would not recommend, even on my worst enemy. This is probably middle of last year. And there's a wonderful story around it as well. That's also similar to my appendix story, which is funny. But yeah, and ended up being that, you go to the urologist and they figure out why this happened. And then, he asked me, he's like, do you drink water? And I said, no, I recognize I am chronically dehydrated. And it's funny, my wife has told me for, since we started dating that's going to catch up to me at some point. And yes, it did. And if that's what it takes to change my behavior on my water intake habits, it did so, and it did so successfully.
This is hilarious because I've also been harping on Quinn for this for years because he's a really good marathon runner. And so when you were helping train me for my ultra marathon years ago, and I noticed you're not drinking any water.
Nope.
We'd go in the sauna, no water. You're literally like a camel, dude.
Yeah.
You're like a camel. So I'm so glad you finally did something about that.
Yeah. So it has been amazing. I started to go on, I think I read the Peter Attia book, and at the similar time, I started to make some very small, incremental life changes, and it was drink a little bit more water. I've not gone no alcohol, but, I've probably drank alcohol 3 or 4 times this year.
Yeah.
And similar to kind of over the holidays. I'm eating better. I'm going to the gym 3 times a week,
Heck
and
yeah.
then I'm running 3 times a week,
Heck
excluding injury for the last couple of weeks. But I mean, all of those things, it's been a very interesting mindset shift for me in the last 4 or 5 months. And so for me, it's not, I'm probably less proud of, I'm drinking. It's the mental state of I'm wanting to do these things, and it's not the individual habits.
Yeah.
It's the mindset of all of these things just sort of get bucketed into that I'm most happy for, honestly.
Yeah, you probably have that great feeling of momentum. Like you've made so much progress from all those incremental changes where it's probably like you feel the headwinds of like, I'm heading in a great direction.
100%, 100%. Now I'm in this weird world where, I'm a rail thin guy, and I didn't want to lose weight. I actually wanted to put a few, muscular pounds on. And I lost weight the last like 3 or 4 months. And, you talk to other people and they're like, you're complaining about that, you jerk, or other words that you shouldn't want to say on this podcast. And so it's for me, I've actually kind of struggled with, okay, I'm eating healthier, I'm exercising, and I'm going in a direction that I don't want to go necessarily. But, I haven't done a pre and a post body fat composition. I'm sure it's probably going in the right direction.
Right.
I know my cholesterol's going down. So it's all of those little markers that for me, I'm noticing even just in a 6-month time window that I'm doing. Yeah.
If you're lifting too, you're definitely just burning off fat. Like if you just up your protein, I'm sure you'll start seeing gains.
The protein side has been very funny. I have really liked the Premier Protein mint chocolate protein shakes.
Oh, yeah.
The little pre-made ones.
Yeah.
And you can get them at Sam's. I think it's 15, and I don't remember what the price is, but you can get like them 15 in a box, basically.
Yeah.
But they only come in the winter. And I drank a few of them last year, and I think they only get sold for 2 or 3 months, I think. And so my wife was talking to me, and she said, are you going to keep drinking these? And I said, yeah, like I'm doing one in the morning and then one after I work out.
Oh,
and
great.
so like I'm probably drinking 10 to 15 a week more than likely. And so she's like, do the math on that. You're going to need a lot of these. And so in our garage right now, I have 20 boxes
Are you kidding
of those because, and if you math that out, it still gets me barely through the summer. So I'm going to have to go find something else for my protein intake for the fall and for the early winter until the stuff comes back out. But yeah, I'm hoarding it like a beaver right now.
Dude, the fact you're drinking 2 a day is great though. I mean, that's a great first step for getting your protein up. Protein shakes are so good for that.
And it's one of the things that she has been really good on for a long time, and I just now have, is the no sugar added stuff. It is amazing walking down the aisle of everything that you can think of, from the loaf of bread that you're just like, it's a loaf of bread, folks. Yeah. And you've got sugar added into all that stuff. And so it's amazing. I think those are like 0 or 1 gram of added sugar. And so those were one of the things that I immediately took to. Yeah.
It is a crazy conversation when you look at how much sugar is and stuff and what sugar does to your body. And yeah, I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole because that's just scary. But to dive into the book, I guess, like I'll let you kind of lead the conversation on this, but maybe you just outline like how he walked you through it, what principles stuck out, just kind of what was important to you about the book.
Yeah, so it, I think of it as this kind of a pyramid almost. It's presented in a way that, your objective is, when you think about longevity, it's not just the time that you're living on this earth, but it's the quality of life that you have from a physical and from a mental perspective. So, like, how do we elongate the time span, but then how do we also elongate the health span? Okay, what's going to shorten that health span? And he describes it as the 4 horsemen. And the 4 horsemen in the medical practice are metabolic issues, cardiovascular issues, neurological issues, and there's one more that, I should know that. But there's one more.
Cardiovascular?
It was cardio, metabolic, neuro. I can't even remember the last one right now.
You're good.
Yeah, but it's basically those 4 things, and we'll remember it in 15 minutes and we can walk through it. So what are those issues? What are the early signals of those things? And so it starts off with like your metabolic health. And so think of that as like how your body processes lipids and fat and your cholesterol, and it's kind of all of that pulled together, and insulin, and how do all of those things get metabolized in your body. And that's sort of the baseline for how are these, what are good biomarkers for this? What are things that probably, if you do like an annual blood screen, you may not even be testing for these types of things. And that's sort of one of the overarching themes is currently, if you think about your annual health, if you think about some of the things you may be talking about with your physician or even some of your specialists, the things that some people believe, and he comes out and says that like it's a newer growing body of science right now. It's not, standard of care in industry right now. And so it's directionally maybe accurate, but not necessarily 100% accurate. And there's all of this body of work that is thinking about these tests, these areas that aren't even covered in your standard medical practices that now you have to think about, okay, how do I go and get this specific biomarker that may be a much better telltale sign of my metabolic health?
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, there's probably 60 to 70% is stuff that I understood and was able to follow. There's also a very technical component to that I understood it. I read it, understood about half of it, and then kind of moved on from it. But it was your metabolic is sort of the starting point, really, on how your body kind of processes insulin. You've got your cardiovascular system, which is very much how do I think about my zone 2 endurance health? How do I think about my strength? And, the couple of data points are like, it's my VO2 max, it's my resting heart rate, and there's a few other biomarkers or just kind of KPIs that you might think about from an athlete per se, but his perspective and some of the literature starts to show that these are good quality indicators of, am I in good overall health relative to that?
And let's real quickly just jump into for the zone 2, like define that for people that are non-runners don't know what that is.
Yeah. So zone 2 is actually not a standard definition of it, but think of it as your ability to comfortably exercise at, if you were jogging and able to talk, but it was kind of, a little bit difficult to get through a full conversation, but you could certainly still do it.
Yeah.
That's sort of the level of exertion that is what he calls kind of zone 2 endurance-ish quality physical health at that point. And so that is, let's say if you were on a rowing machine and you were like, or a bicycle, like a stationary bike, how far could you go in an hour that keeps you in that like heart rate zone of that level of comfortability, and how far you can go, how much power you can exert. There's a couple of different ways that you can test it, but where you are at in that sort of stage of exercise, and if it's really, really low or really, really high, is an indicator of how good my cardiovascular health is. And then, so think of that as the endurance side, and then more of like the strength side. It's grip strength. It's your ability to have your VO2 max, or the volume of oxygen that your body can absorb and utilize. And sort of there's a couple of those things that sort of help with the short burst strength-based items related to your health. And so those are kind of the couple of areas that they specifically talk about on like the cardiovascular side. Yeah.
And then resting heart rate
as well. So, I mean, you think about, generally, if you are an athlete, you probably have a lower resting heart rate relative to the standard human. And so, generally, a lower resting heart rate is kind of a sense that your body can continue to function with the smallest amount of energy and output that you possibly can.
It's more efficient.
That's exactly what it is. And so that's one of those other things that he goes through as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was the first part, and then the next one.
Yep. So after that as well, they go into neurological. So one of the four horsemen is sort of your neurological disorders, and so think of that as like Alzheimer's, dementia, etc. And so those are, think of it as like plaque that's building up inside your brain. And how do we, there's even kind of question marks of, is it good? Is it bad? Is there a certain type that's good? Is there a certain type that's bad? Is it an input or an output? And again, back to this world of, we're not entirely certain on a lot of this. And I think if I remember correctly, the neurological side is the area that like, okay, if you've got high blood pressure, you can be put on a statin to help lower that. Like, we've got medicine and we have things in our world, be it diet or exercise, that can help manage some of those things. On the neurological side, we don't have a lot of information on why it happens, how it happens, and the fields of study that exist there are just so new. And we don't have a lot of elongated data to be able to help us say, do these things, don't do these things. Here are treatment plans. Here are preventative plans. And so generally you kind of fall back on, it's diet and exercise. And it's also on top of this foundational side of your metabolic health as well. And so the general concept was like your metabolic health leads into these other things. And it was, and so having a better exercise, better VO2 max, all of these things sort of combine to, we think you're going to have a lower likelihood, excluding genetic things, of, being able to avoid or severely delay some of those types of things.
Yeah, I think it's really cool how all of this ties in together. Like it used to just kind of be, if I eat a lot of food, I'm going to put on weight and I'm just going to look overweight. But now it's like you're starting to realize that you're increasing your likelihood of having different long-term consequences of different diseases. And then also how that affects your mental health as well. And so I think it's cool that it's like they're finally taking it one step further and looking at everything together and like going past just like the visual of, oh, you're overweight, but like what else that means for you too.
Yeah. And it's these, those are outcomes from things that have happened already. And so it's almost like, you've got a river and you've got, junk coming down the river. You can go at the very tail end and you can kind of shovel the stuff out, or you can go upstream and you can try to figure out, why is junk getting dumped into the river and how do I prevent that from going on? And so that's sort of a very key focus of how do we go as far upstream as we possibly can safely and with some level of efficacy behind it.
Yeah, I love that. I often think about it as like the root cause versus the Band-Aid. And there's a listener to the podcast named Clayton. I think his podcast that he started is actually called The Root Cause, but he talks about kind of functional medicine versus like how healthcare is working in general with like just prescribing different pills and different things. And it's like, if you're trying to actually get down to what the root cause problem of something is, you need to go downstream, like you're saying, and look at what is leading to this rather than, I have a headache, let me just take medicine to numb the headache and block the neural receptors. But rather it could just be, hey, you have a headache because you're dehydrated. Or you have a headache because of something else that's going on. Like if you start asking why and try and get down to like the root cause of it versus I'm just going to take a pill that's going to block a neural receptor or induce me chemically with something, that doesn't fix the problem.
And it's also taking a holistic view, right? As an example, it's possible that I'm also overtraining. So very, very likely on that front, but I'm running into some SI joint pain. And, that very much like a skeletal perspective issue there. And, you do a little bit of research and it's actually, a tight hip flexor on the front may end up leading to pain on the back. And so it's a muscle that's leading on a different side of the body that's leading to pain on the other side of the body. And so one thing I've noticed as well is like, how do you look at this holistically? It's not just, very specific, back to your comment of like symptom. It's possible that there's an entirely other thing that feels unrelated that may be leading to that as well.
Yeah, man, I love that type of stuff. Did it talk all about fasting?
So it did. He and this was one that actually, he puts in the book that he is open to changing his mind as net new literature comes out, as he tests it with his own patients. He will adjust the things that he recommends, both publicly and then also in private with his own specific clients. And fasting was actually one of them, because I think originally he was hardcore like certain fasting lifestyles, and I think in the book he actually sort of walks that back and says, "Yeah, I've actually changed my position on that a little bit." And I don't think he necessarily dissuades it, but he said the literature that I'm finding and with my specific patients, there are situations, sometimes more majority than minority, where the side effects or the negative components that come with it may actually be more detrimental than the value you may get by actually doing it.
Really?
And so it was a really, you read, the self-help books, the health books, the longevity books, do this, eat a potato and you'll live for 100 years type of thing. I see some of those and you think about like snake oil and all of that. I appreciated a few different moments in the book where he brought things like that in, which was, I am very data-driven and open to changing my mind. And it's funny, you see the gurus, the whatever, you see some of those and it's almost a religious cult in some of those things. And that, I worry about those. Someone who's coming in and saying, I don't know all the answers, here's kind of where we're at, and actually I've changed my position as I know more. I've appreciated that approach into how he presented the book.
Yeah.
And none of it's perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't pretend it to be, but I at least appreciate that as sort of the frame of reference as you go through.
Yeah, I think it increases your credibility because it shows that you want to honor the truth. Like you're not just trying to sell one narrative, but by actually admitting where you've changed your position on something, you show that you're willing to try and do what's in the best interest for your reader.
That's true. And one of the things as well, and this is something, back to your comment about your generation being a kind of a really strong driver of some of these new health waves, or kind of caring about your health and all of that. The way that he finished the book, and I think that one of the last items was really your mental health, right? You can have a very long life. You can have a very healthy life. And if you're not enjoying it, what's the purpose? Or if you're not in a positive mental state of mind, if you don't have quality friends and relationships that you can sort of lean on, what's the purpose of it as well? And so he actually finishes the book really focused around the mental health side, and he brings kind of his own perspective and some of his stories into that. I actually thought when it comes to some of the things in the last 5 to 10 years, both in mainstream but also like public workplace as well, the mental health side has become much more of an issue, and I appreciated that addition into this kind of highly technical side of the book as well.
Yeah, I like how, again, it's connecting all of the dots, not just like I ate too much food, now this is how I look, but rather taking it one step further. And the sustainability comment that you're talking about, like the longevity of it, the quality of life, that relates perfectly to my last week's podcast episode where I talked about I'm really obsessed with the idea of compounding. I think you probably know this by now, just like how all of your habits compound and how momentum compounds and how it leads to opportunities down the road. And the example I used was if you're working 5 days a week, if the average person works 5 days a week and you work 6 days a week, you're working 20% more than them. And then if you do 7, that's 40% more. So in theory, you're accomplishing 40% more than that person. So as that compounds over the course of a year, 2 years, 3 years, you're that much further away from the person who's only doing the bare minimum or the average at that point. And the podcast, in that podcast, what I talked about was that theory only works if you don't factor in diminished returns. And diminished returns come from things like burnout and not taking care of yourself. And so I guess kind of the gist of that podcast was like, if you are a hyper ambitious person that wants to create that separation by working more hours, you have to find a way that's sustainable for yourself to actually do that by factoring in things like your sleep, your diet, your exercise, and how all of these things actually can affect your mental health and keeping you in the right mind frame. Because if you're stressed out and you're underslept and like mentally you're not in the right headspace, you're not going to focus as well. You're not going to be as efficient. You may be working 80 hours, but you're getting less done than the person working 40 in some situations.
Yeah. It is a really good call out because there's, time doesn't necessarily lead to output and quality output, and there are side effects with all of that. That's a great component to it. And I wonder, as we start to think about how mental health is impacting things in the workplace and all of that, you see people looking at different ways of working, be it remote work or whatever. You think about the time scale of how long people are productive. It's interesting just in the last, let's call it 5 or 10 years, of how people are viewing that prospectively differently. And there's arguments to be made on both sides of those equations. And it's interesting just to see where people come from that. Those are always some of my most fun discussions, are talking about how people get the most output and quality output from individuals that also lead to like long-term sustainable, able to do it, not working 125 hours a week type of thing. So yeah,
that's also generational change because our parents and our grandparents used to just be, you put your head down, you work, and you don't care about how you feel or what else is going on. And now like we talk about that a lot more. And I'm still the mindset of like, you got to get the work done and get the outcome that you want. But like, I believe that you should enjoy what you're doing while you're doing it. So you got to find a way to do it that's sustainable, like we're talking about. And it used to just be, no, I'm going to just push through no matter what. And now it's like, I'd like to enjoy it while I'm doing it.
Yeah. And it's never an either or, it's always a balancing act, right? There are always times where there's more stuff in the day that you need to get done. And there's just, you got to go through and grind sometimes. So it's always this fine balancing act. And I know you guys with the restaurant, you're figuring out like, where does the side of the envelope that's like, okay, this is my limit that I feel good with, and like, where's inbounds, where's out of bounds? Because I remember listening to some of the other ones that you're not necessarily exploring, but you're finding where some of those things are for you individually as well.
Yeah, I did a couple podcasts in the beginning talking about, I wanted to find where my actual limit was for like how much could I actually handle. And then, because then you can, once you set the limit, then you're familiar with the feeling of when you're getting towards that. So you can back off just before then.
Yeah.
So you can still try and maximize your efficiency without actually hitting that max limit where life sucks at that point for just a little second.
Yeah. And it's, you're never going to get it perfect. And I always view it as like, it's never like a mark in the sand. It's always like, it's a rubber band. Like you stretch it a little bit further, then you lax it a little bit too much. And it's always sort of this, like, it's a ship going on true north. Like you're always kind of bouncing around it a little bit.
I do believe you can increase your capacity though to handle difficult things and work, because I think it's just like a muscle in the gym where the only way to actually get the muscle to grow is you actually have to stress it. Mm-hmm. Now, I guess to continue with that metaphor, you also have to take care of the muscle. You have to allow it to rest. You have to properly give it the nutrition and all the different things we talked about. I think it's the same way. It's like push it as far as it can go, allow it to recover, get some reps in, and then push it again. And then just keep doing that. And eventually you'll have a higher 1 rep max than you did before. And I think it's the same thing with your work capacity.
Yeah. And I, not to bring in the whole, AI thing of this whole world, but he
found a way.
I know. And I'm normally, and I think generally, I'm not anti-AI. I think there's, is some of it's very much overblown. Some of it's, we're not where we want to be. It's more hype than reality. I think we're sussing through all of that right now. But what I do find interesting is you have individuals that now have the capacity to be able to do vastly more with the same number of hours, the same physical output, but you're able to sort of leverage yourself a little bit more, which I find very interesting. And I'm curious to see how that impacts how people work, how people think about training, number of hours, how do I build an employee base? Like those are all things that we're at the early stages, and I'm super interested to track all of that.
I really like using AI to help me with balancing perspective, because especially doing something like this, I've never done it before. And so all of these experiences are my first time around. So I know what my gut reaction is for how to handle situations, but I'll often go into ChatGPT, outline the situation and say, here's what I'm thinking about it. Provide an alternative perspective. Because then what it'll do is it'll give you the alternative perspectives with the justification, and then you can read through them and decide, do I think that's valid for the situation or not? You can pick the best one out of them.
Yeah. And I to even bring it back to the book of one of the things that you see in sort of this medicine 3.0 world is personalized medicine. And, we were even talking about the ice bath thing, and it's something that's for you, you're getting value. For you, your personalized health, it's a valuable tool for you. And I think I'm hoping with AI, be it how we think about like personalized nutrition, personalized workouts and all of that, but also new drug discovery and all of these things as well. That's what I think I'm going to be super interested in, is how do these technologies play a role in personalizing your own medicine, your own nutrition, your own exercise. That to me, I think is going to be very interesting to track too.
Yeah, because I think eventually the idea is it'll become like kind of Jarvis from Iron Man, where you've always got an AI assistant on you that can continually track things, which is scary, but hopefully help you have a larger capacity, which is what you're saying of like, it can help you with a food log. It can give you quick calorie counts. You can literally take the data from your watch and your sleep and your heart rate and your VO2 variability, and then incorporate that with the food log and all of it, and give you this more holistic perspective on your health. And then say, hey, Quinn, seems like, I know you said your head hurts. Here, based off your data, here's maybe a couple of things that you should do that you could consider about that.
100%. And, you walk into your annual, physician's visit that takes 10 to 15 minutes or whatever. And, you can they see that, and you are describing maybe symptoms that are probably like in the last 30 days, much more relevant than maybe they were 6 months ago or whatever. And so you've got a very small window of data, either like point in time that day or a strong recency bias, or you can sort of have your Apple Watch, your Garmin, your continuous glucose monitor, your whatever these other things are. And, maybe your doc walks in and it's like, yeah, I know what you have been over the last 12 months. Or like, hey, I have no idea if this thing exists, but like, okay, I've got Quinn's dashboard, and like, I know where he's at 4 months when I saw him 4 months ago, and now I can see where he's at right now. And I'm like, hey, Quinn, like, lay off the sugar because your whatever's out of whack. And so that to me, I think, is the interesting next step that with all of this is like, how do you help also move your environment around you from your health and from the physician side of the world into this more proactive space, because you're armed with data using some of these tools. Like, that's a super interesting space for me.
Yeah, I like that. The one thing that concerns me about how helpful AI can be is, not the one thing, but one of the big things that concerns me about it is removing some of your decision-making process. Like to this date, like in high school and everything up, because AI for me really took hold like my senior year of college.
Okay.
You could use ChatGPT to write an essay, do all that type of stuff. Like,
but you didn't. You used it as maybe some inspiration, but you never used it as a
yeah, definitely
for sure.
But I already graduated. But like seeing that different senior year where you can literally give it a prompt and it'll write the essay for you, I actually really dislike that because I became. I learned so much about the way that I think and how to structure arguments and understanding like the importance of different vernacular and how to arrange all of that from having to do that terrible essay at midnight that you didn't want to have to do it. And you put it off for too long and it sucked and you had to cite your sources. And there's so much critical thinking that goes on that's what I worried that AI can remove. Like when you just type in, here's my situation, here's this, give me an answer.
Yeah. It's the way that someone described it to me that I thought was sort of interesting is imagine memorizing multiplication tables without understanding addition and what multiplication actually is.
Yeah.
Why does 3 times 3 equal 9? What's 3 plus 3 plus 3? Well, if you didn't know addition and you didn't have to understand that whole baseline concept, I can memorize 3 times 3 equals 9 and figure that stuff out. You are much better off in your math world and the things that you're going to have to do with it, understanding the fundamentals and being good at that. And that being at least your baseline understanding of how you learned to get there versus just being given round 1 and then you have to start to memorize or solve for round 2 or round 3.
Yeah, it just hurts you so much you don't understand the function of what's going on in that situation. Especially when it comes to critical thinking, it's like, I want this. Why? I don't really know.
Nope.
And then you can't get what you want in life if you don't know how to structure a cohesive argument.
Yeah. And you mentioned, you bring up the I want this or why or something like that. One of the things that I'm really getting into right now as well is, have you heard the phrase ikigai out of curiosity?
No, what's that?
So have you seen online, it's sort of this like Venn diagram of what you're good at, what you enjoy, what the world needs, and then like what the world will pay you for.
Yeah.
So like, and then in the middle of all of those, there's this thing called ikigai, and it's it comes from, it's Japanese in origin, and it's basically, I think they use it and they kind of change it up a little bit to fit that specific thing, but the general concept is finding your purpose in life and having that be the thing that you work on or the thing that brings you joy and you're able to spend more time on it. That's one thing that I'm starting to spend a little bit more time on as well, and thinking through that, because it's funny, every job that you have, there are parts of it that you like and there are parts of it you don't like. And the thing that I've not done a phenomenal job on, why do I like this?
Yeah.
What about it do I really enjoy? And thinking about it of what is my actual core passion that just so happens to turn into this role or this project or whatever that is. And so I've, as a part of this whole, new year, new me type of thing, like I'm starting to think through some of those in a much more deep level. And I'm in the early stages. I've not figured a lot of that out. And I hope the next time I'm on the podcast, I'm learning some of that. But right now I'm spending real meaningful time thinking through some of those things as well.
You got to read or listen to Simon Sinek's Start with Why.
Yeah.
Have you read that one yet?
I have read that one.
We talked about this. That's right.
We might have. Yeah. And that was I think there were a couple of those reads or audiobooks that I think were early inspiration for that. And then now I'm turning into the Audible guy right now. And so we have, I've got a list of 20 books that are on backlog right now that I'm just starting to go through. And a lot of them sort of tend to this purpose, why, start with why, Ikigai, there's actually a book on it as well. And so I'm starting to delve into some of those a little bit more right now. Yeah.
That Ikigai concept, I really like it, but I did see a meme about it now that you bring it up. I was with Derek Sorrells and he showed me, it was the Venn diagram, and it was what I enjoy, what I'm good at, and what the world finds valuable. And then it was a dot right in the middle. None of the Venn diagram connected. It was just him in the middle. It was like, I'm in none of the circles.
That's funny. That's funny. And I wonder if people sort of feel like they're in that spot.
Yeah.
And I maybe that thing is not. Maybe it's not a reality. Maybe it's a dream to be chased, and it's not an actual place that you can actually end up. I have no idea, but that's an interesting concept to bring in there too. Yeah,
I think a lot of it comes from the feeling of progress. Like, I guess you got to kind of care about what you're doing, but I feel like at least I was like, what is my passion? What's my passion? I asked that a lot when I was younger. And I don't think you start with your passion. I don't think many people actually know what their passion is first. I think you just got to start doing a bunch of stuff and figuring out what you actually like. And then when you find out what you like, when you feel the progress and moving towards it, you like it even more and it becomes more interesting. I think that's the feeling people really get addicted to.
Yeah. There's a book that I'm middle of reading or listening to right now. I think it's called The Art of Impossible or something very, very similar to that. And the one thing I really like about it is they take this exact premise of, I don't know what I'm passionate about. Like the number of people that I talk to that you go and talk to them like, what are you passionate about? And they're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot more of those people out there than you would like to see on that. And they basically take that concept and they actually boil it down to, okay, what are you curious about? Here's like 5 experiments that you can do to figure out like, what are you curious about? And then what are you sort of like naturally inclined that like in, at 10 o'clock that no one else is doing, but you're doing it because you've got a natural like propensity for it. And they have a few of these steps to start to boil into like, okay, here's your giant like, crime scene murder map thing. Help us put the red string together.
Right.
And so like I'm like a quarter of the way through that one, and I'm hoping that one is an interesting little guidebook for me to help to sort of backtrack and understand, okay, why am I interested in these things? Oh, it's because I like X, Y, and Z. Well, that makes a ton of sense. And then you've got a much better roadmap for like, okay, this probably means that I might like this and I might like this, or I might really deeply care about this. I'm curious to see what comes out of that.
You're on such a good trajectory right now. Like you're already a motivated guy. That's why I think we were drawn to each other. But this year, the fact you're actually working out, you're taking a look at your health, your longevity, all of the other elements go into that. And now you're taking it a step further of like, what do I actually care about? And then trying to like, this a little bit of an enlightenment almost experiment that you're going down. Like, what a cool trajectory that you're on right now.
And the answer honestly is yes. Like I'm really, really excited about that. And I hope I'm able to continue sort of this mindset as well. I also have to recognize that I'm in a position that I have the ability to do that, right? I'm in a world where, my wife and I kind of made a decision this year that we're not going to let money be the impediment for us making healthy lifestyle decisions. So like something so simple as, you're at the store and you're picking up a can of green beans, like it's 60 cents more to get the no salt added version. Grab the no salt added version. It's something as simple as that, or, certain tests that you may or may not be affordable to the certain or to certain individuals. Like if they're in our budget and we've done okay in life and we're able to do some of those things. So I also recognize that like the ability for me to think about, I'm in a place where I'm financially able to poke and prod and experiment and think about trade-offs of what I care about maybe versus what pays me the most money.
Right.
Like I have enough of a foundation there that I'm able to start to do that. And so I don't take that for granted at all. And that's something that I have to continually remind myself too, because that's on the personal fulfillment side. That's on the health side too, right? One of the things that, one of the criticisms of the Peter Attia book is, it's similar to who's the guy that's like spending $2 million a year to keep himself?
Right. I think Brian Johnson's name.
Yeah. And it's, conceptually, and I watched the documentary, like it's super cool, right?
Yeah.
It's unattainable for 99 point something % of all of the people out there. And that was one of the criticisms of the book was like, think of these blood tests that you do on either a 6-month or a 1-year basis. Like if you stack all of those things up, the average household may not be able to do those types of things or get these types of tests or make these types of decisions. Or they're like, yo, I got 3 kids and both of us together, we're putting together, $100 a month in savings, if at all.
Yeah.
And like, I don't have the ability to go and test an experiment with what I find interesting and take a pay cut to go and do that. I got to put food on the table.
Yeah.
And so there is this fine balance that I also have to recognize, like I am blessed and able to do those things. And I have to keep myself in that mental pattern too.
First, I'll say that's definitely valid what you said, but me being on my counter perspective journey that I've been on right now, I will say that they're deferring your health down the road because money is an issue is also costly. decision to be making.
It's short-term versus long-term type thing.
It is short-term versus long-term.
That's true.
And being someone that is in a different income bracket than you are, there are low-cost solutions that you can do in your life that will have a big net positive impact. Not being able to exercise, who can't go for a walk? Who can't do push-ups in their bedroom? If you want to get...
Assuming you're able to, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. If you need to increase your hydration, who can't put a little bit of salt in their water and just stir it up? Like, you can't do all of the fancy stuff maybe they talk about in the book and the top 1% of people get to do. But I would also just challenge people to think about what small little low cost benefits can I do to improve my lifestyle.
Where is that 80-20 of, I can't do these things, but I can make this small incremental whatever. And for me, like it's, I spent $30 on the water bottle thing that I carry around. And like, it's having that thing in my hand that's like, Quinn, you got to drink, 2 of these
It's
a
a
day.
good reminder, isn't
Right.
it?
It is. And, that's a trend that's been going on for more than a decade that obviously I'm way behind on that. But I think to me, that's like that interesting microcosm. And you're exactly right of, if you are able to like go out on a walk, get down, do a couple of push-ups, do a few sit-ups, like it's things like that. And, the nutrition side. And one of the things that I'm reading in some of my other books, it's not covered in the Peter Attia book, but it's about, people think about kind of what is a comfortable life to live, and what's a livable wage, and what's all of these things. And I think the definition of what is livable is very different for certain people, right? There are certain people that can, like, with a family of 4, can make it on $500-$600 a month in food, and they're or even less probably for some people. And so like it's all about like, what are you willing to kind of comfortably give up on some of that? And so that is a great distinction or a great comment around like, there is a mindset of, there's probably a little bit of kind of fat in your life that you can trim off to make and get some of these outcomes that have a lot of value add for a little bit of input there.
Yeah.
That's a good call.
I'm curious too, like you mentioned the carrying the water bottle around has gotten you to drink more water. I've noticed that if I don't fill my water bottle when I'm by a water tap or something, I'll drink less water because like what I do is I shake it to see how much is in there because mine's a black water bottle. And so whenever I do that, if there's not much water, it's like, okay, well, I'm out of water. But if it's full, I've found that I'll drink far more water because like I've got plenty of water left. Yeah. So that's like a little thing that I've done. I'm curious, like from reading the book, what other small changes you've kind of already started to make in your life?
That's a great question. For me, and I've had a Garmin for a long time, and like the step count of like, okay, there was a little bit of the blue zone of like, what are the habits of people that are in these blue zones that are, living really, really long, and like, what are they doing? And, their default is walking around and doing stuff and not getting in a car and driving to the office and all of that. And so for me, I have found that, I don't know if it was necessarily mentioned in the book, but a lot of my meetings are now 25 minutes and 45 minutes. And then if I've got 15 minutes and I'm working from home, I'll do a lap around the block and it takes me 6 minutes.
Oh, sweet.
And it'll get me 600, 700 steps. And if you do that 4 or 5 times, like one, there's a natural like mental reset that kind of happens there. But then also like I can start to add up a lot of those things that put me into that lifestyle more so than anything else. So that's one thing that I think I'm doing. For me on the water side, it's if I'm going to the office in the morning and driving into town, I have to leave with a full water bottle. Because if I don't, then it's just going to sit in front of me and I'm going to get to lunch and I'm going to, it's probably not going to get filled up.
Same thing,
It's all of that. And so I have to like physically fill it up in the morning to be like, oh, you dummy, like drink a little bit before and then on your way to the office, and it gets me into the good rhythm there.
Yeah. So on your comment of like taking 15 minutes to go for a walk, just like consistently, I've actually started doing the same thing. So we're in like a rectangular plot right now at the restaurant. We're recording at the Broken Egg. And if you walk from our back door of the kitchen around the rectangular plot, it's 0.3 miles.
Okay.
And so what I did was I was curious. I've been doing this for weeks now because it's starting to get nice outside and it really helps me just kind of take a second to process and step away. And I was like, how far am I walking when I do this? So I wore my Garmin. I did miss one day. I didn't wear my Garmin one day this week, so I'm missing a little bit of data. But 3.1 miles from doing that this week.
That's cool.
So
that's very cool.
It all kind of adds up and makes a big difference if you just do little pieces at a time like that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the, back to the, sometimes money allows you or doesn't allow you to. Like, I live 7 miles from where I work because I can't afford to live half a mile from where I work, right? So I don't have the luxury of like walk to the office in the morning and do all of that. So I think, we as, individuals that I would consider like the normal people, like you have to sort of start to incorporate these things in. And sometimes it's if you're sitting at a corporate job, you'd go and walk from one side of campus to the other. And I would do that, early on in my career, not a ton, but a little bit. And so like you have to sort of find ways to bake it into your existing lifestyle. Yeah.
We need to get a Garmin on Rob Gerlach because that man paces more than anyone I know. And he's on the phone 24/7. So he's probably in an office that's 10 foot by 10 foot, but he's getting a lot of steps.
They got to check his carpet because there might be a section where it's sort of sunk in a little bit.
You can see the wear on it.
It's probably true. It's probably true.
Oh, I love it. Anything else from the book and kind of these lifestyle changes that have stuck out to you?
I will say that one of the things, for either good or bad, I made a lot of these changes all at once. So I started to eat a little bit, quite a bit healthier, and I'm not perfect by any stretch, but like made a substantial change probably mid Q4 last year. Started drinking a lot more water at the same time. Started to exercise about 6 months ago, and that's 3 days of strength training, 3 days of endurance, and I am in a much better mental place, and I'm in a much better physical place. I don't know which of those is the 80-20 on that. And so the good news, the bad news is that there's likely some of those where I could back off on a couple of these and probably get 80% of that value, but I could reduce a lot of the inputs on that. But also because I did it at the same time, because I don't know, I'm maintaining doing all of them.
Because you're afraid of which lever to pull. That's
exactly it. That's exactly it. And that's the alcohol, that's the whatever, that, I'm doing all of those things. And because I'm feeling really good right now, I don't want it to stop. So I'm just going to keep doing all of them. And there may come a point where that's not sustainable. But for right now, it's at least forcing me to sort of do all of them as opposed to none of them, which I'm also not normally like that. I'm normally sort of the incremental one at a time. And so this is very off character for me as well.
So Quinn, being the analytical guy that I love, he's talking about optimization right now, the 80-20 rules, the Pareto distribution that says that 20% of your inputs account for 80% of your outputs.
Yep.
And so it basically tells you where to invest your time or which actions are the most fruitful for you.
Yep.
And so you're saying you've made all these changes at once. So you don't know which changes to attribute to the most outcome that you're feeling from a mental standpoint.
Yep.
So yeah, that's funny because that's how my brain works too. And I'm also afraid to kind of back off too much and then start to feel bad again.
Yeah. I'm in that boat, and I've got I'm thankful that I've got enough time and still kind of mental will to continue to do all of these things. Because every week, you go and you hang out with the family, and you go and they have an amazing meal planned for you. That is not something that you should probably, and you're just like, you know what? I'm sacrificing some of that for a really quality time with my family. And so it's all of these trade-offs, and none of it is perfect. But I like the fact that at least right now I've got the ability to continue to do all of them, which is good.
Yeah, eating's been a good thing for me. Like, because when I was in college, I eat literally whatever just because it was cheap and you just were hungry all of the time. But now that, you own a restaurant, again, talking about a position that most people aren't in, it's been so much better to be consistent. So what I like to do is I have 3 eggs with 3 slices of bacon every morning for breakfast, which is close to 30 grams of protein to start the day. And then I'll usually eat some sort of lunch here, whether like just an omelet or we have a chicken sandwich I like or something like that. It's not the healthiest. But then for dinner, I'll either meal prep chicken, rice, and sweet potatoes, or my girlfriend actually makes dinner pretty often, and we'll make like elk or steak or something like that with rice, and then no gluten in it at all either, which has been good for me.
Goodness.
And so what I realized is like, 2 out of my 3 meals, I'm eating really well, like 66% of the time. And so it's kind of like that take and give of like, you don't have to be super strict, but for me, it's about 66% of the time, like, this is probably the healthiest I've ever been, like how I feel, how I look, how I've been able to function. And so my correct lever being pulled is 66% of the time I need to eat healthy.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this, and I assume many physicians will probably say, like, don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Mm-hmm. Like, if you can make small incremental changes, like, that's better than the baseline on that front. So like, do those things, and don't let not doing it all 3 meals a day, 7 days a week,
Yeah.
be the enemy of doing it at all.
Yeah. Sweet.
Also, random question. Is there like a standard like elk supply in Wichita that I don't know about? Like
She hunts.
Okay, got it.
This is elk that she has killed.
Okay. That's cool and terrifying at the same, and awesome.
It is slightly terrifying. But I'll tell you what, it's so cool to go over there and she's just got a freezer full of basically free meat. She killed it.
And that's good.
And you know where it came from too.
Yeah, that's true. How do you prefer your elk? And I don't think I've ever spoken those words, but like, how do you prefer your elk?
I have never eaten this much elk before in my life, so I'm still pretty new to it. But it's from the view of it, looks like there's elk sausage and then elk steak and then ground elk are the 3 variations that I've seen it in so far. I'd say probably elk steak or ground elk has been my preferred method.
How would you describe a Delta versus like beef or something? I mean, I assume there's like a little bit of the gaminess that might exist, but like, what are the other things that like are?
I think it's just lower fat, honestly. Like
Okay.
the taste is pretty similar, but I think it's just leaner.
Okay. Is it chewier because of that?
Maybe a little bit.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah, maybe I'm not the most. I kind of just shovel food down. I don't
That's
observe
fair.
too much.
That's probably very true.
It tastes pretty good though.
Yeah, that's what matters. And you said it's leaner as well, so that's a positive I can imagine.
Yeah,
too.
high in protein.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes,
There you go.
I like it. Quinn, anything else?
Man, that's it. When was the last time I was on the podcast?
You came on, I want to say like 3 months ago. I don't remember exactly, but I want to say that's roughly right.
Okay. All in, I think when I was thinking back to what I was saying on that podcast specifically, it was like I'm starting to kind of move in a good direction. Like there was early momentum going, and like I'm not where I want to be by any stretch of the imagination, but like momentum is still going in the right direction, which is really good.
Will we ever be where we actually want to be?
Bring it in the philosophical at the tail end of this. I think the answer is yes. And the way that I say that is, where I want to be is a state of mind, but not necessarily a destination.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And you can drop like the Keanu Reeves, like put the Keanu Reeves like face on me right now. But no, it's like if when I was in college and we were doing macroeconomics or microeconomics, and we were talking about like things as a utility function, and the utility function is simply like how much utility or value do I get out of this? And I thought in my mind, and I'm like, okay. Life is simply it's a utility function that you have to maximize as much as possible. So like if I'm in a mindset of I'm happy, I'm fulfilled, I'm surrounded by the people I care about, I'm financially, there's not necessarily a target in mind, but I'm comfortable, I'm able to do the things that I want and I'm moving in the right direction. Like to me, it's sort of this, if I'm at that sense of peace, sense of contentment, sense of whatever that is, that to me probably feels like what the goal is on that front. And it's always going to be like, there's always things you want to continue to do and do a little bit better. But like, if you're in that space mentally, that to me probably feels like the goal versus like tactical KPI thing that I want to get to. Talk to me in 2 weeks and I may think completely different about that. But like, that's kind of what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah. I'm not there. I am Kaizen. I am continuous improvement.
Love it. And that's what is it? You have to enjoy the process. So if you fall in love with the process, like maybe that's your being continually improved is maybe your state of like satisfaction that you want to get to. I don't know.
The journey is the reward. But I will also make the distinction that you're 10 years ahead of me in your journey here.
That's
so
true. Thanks for that. Appreciate that. Thanks for letting all these listeners know. But,
I'm saying that because I just haven't earned my stripes yet. Like maybe I will feel that way when I'm your age because you're far, far older than I am.
Man, I got a lot of stripes to continue to get. So, we're both on the same journey there.
I will say I can feel this sense of like calm and kind of peace with you. And I really love where your head's at. Makes me happy.
Me too.
Quinn, where can people find you? Plug your massive LinkedIn following.
Quinn Robertson on LinkedIn. I think it's Quinn-Robertson. I think I somehow got that handle.
Handle, man.
If you find the guy with like the black sweater, at least right now it's a black sweater and like one eye slightly closed, like that's the LinkedIn profile. I am off. I think I am technically on Twitter and technically on Facebook, but I have them off my phone. I don't check them. I don't post. LinkedIn's really the only place that people can get to me, and I'm okay with that. I'm in a much better mental headspace for the last probably 3 or 4 years because of that too.
And he's gatekeeping. He may not even connect with you on LinkedIn. You can try, but he may not accept
That's
it.
possible. Get it? Is it DMs in LinkedIn? Is that what it is? I don't know. What
I think it might be a PM, a private message.
Maybe that's what it is. It's so you can PM me. It's a thing that people say. I don't know. Yeah, but you can. I don't have like a ton that I usually have to sort through. So come and say hi.
Yeah, or you can reach out to me and I'll also gatekeep and kind of vet you out, and then maybe I'll introduce you.
I appreciate that, and I trust your judgment, so that works out.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, fair.
You can find me at Jacob O'Connor. The podcast at Real Period Conversations. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to share it with a friend. Quintanius, my brother, thank you for coming back on.
It was absolute pleasure, and I was glad that I was back to be in Wichita for this for sure.
Yeah, see you, man.
See you.